shouldn't spoil the fairy tale, should I? You and your little gingerbread house.
Let it be a fairy tale, then. Once upon a time.
Well, the tonal shift for season 3 really started in season 2. We started to get a little looser with our crime procedural stories and allowing killers of the week, as it were, to extend beyond that week into future episodes. And that felt like it was the beginning of trying out a different framework for the storytelling on the show.
I think that the more like obvious superficial changes in the storyline, and which are reflected in the way that we're dressing and so on and so forth, were also reflected in a kind of change of the shape and the structure and the way that Brian was writing, in that procedural element and that crime of the week element, which obviously was more strong in season 1 and persisted to a certain extent through season 2, we really jettisoned.
So that by the time we got to season 3, it really was about servicing the tone of the trauma or the post-trauma of everything that's happened with these characters.
And so he was able to write in a much more kind of looping, cursive way, if you like, and in a sense, I felt like for the first several episodes we were still, like almost irresistibly, Brian was drawing us back into that scene in the kitchen at the end of season 2, and it took me a while to grasp that was a good reflection of the way I think that trauma works.
They told me he knew exactly how to cut me. They said it was surgical. He wanted us to live.
He left us to die.
But we didn't. He was supposed to take me with him.
I really wanted to make sure that we were striking out and doing something unique on television, as is always my want, because I think if you're going to be doing something, you should endeavor to do it differently. Otherwise, you're a plagiarist.
Obviously, the characters are, in a certain degree, set in stone. But having said that, they can embrace a lot. So Brian keeps surprising us where we're going every single episode.
Well, again, in the tale of Hannibal, the book, of the really beginning of Hannibal's life out, as a professor, in the shades of Tuscany, very rich, very, very yellow. And that's not necessarily at all what we had done in season 1 and 2.
Season 3 of Hannibal entered on a completely different tone, starting in Europe. Hence the flavor of the show and the look of the show was quite different. It was very rich. It was not that it wasn't rich before, but it had a different quality, which we all tried very hard to accomplish through the means that we had at hand.
Wanting to set season 3 apart felt like the organic point in the story to try things that were different, and being able to go to Italy allowed us to change the aesthetic of the show. It allowed us to change the wardrobe for what Hannibal was wearing.
It was a little cheeky, wasn't it? I mean, you see me in a leather jacket once, and that's it, and it's all over the posters, and that's the only time he wears that one.
Opening the entire season with him on a motorcycle in a leather jacket and a helmet, and being something unexpected to what we've seen previously on the shows.
It felt fun to ride that bike and wear that leather jacket. But we also had, as we have today, a hair issue, because I was wearing this helmet, and whatever product we were putting in the hair was just basically standing like this every time I took off the helmet. So we did reshoot that a few times. And then quite fast he's back in his old 3-piece suit, but he's getting looser and looser. He's in an environment that he feels extremely familiar with.
Because he was now on the run and requiring a new identity, he adopted that identity through other people. And anyone who's watched the show will know that the first person that he killed became his new identity. So in the costume side of things, I wanted to blend Hannibal's flair for dressing with that of the Professor Fell.
Punch Romaine. a cocktail created by Escoffier, served to first-class guests on the Titanic during their last dinner.
Professor Fell tended to wear bow ties and suits, and Hannibal added a bit of color to those combinations, and I think probably looked a little more academic than he did in his Baltimore incarnation as a psychiatrist.
So the show gets looser, so does Hannibal.
There's a major shift from season 1 and 2 into season 3, which is fun and it's seductive. You know, Hannibal now is being very seductive, and we were, speaking of seductive, seduced by Bedelia du Maurier being this femme fatale. Well, she was able to now be the bride of Frankenstein, you know, so the bride of Hannibal, and have a lot of fun with that, and really, and it's danger always around the corner.
May I get dressed?
You may.
I think the fact that Brian created it starting in Europe set it off on a very sort of exciting and somewhat fascinating new tone for the season.
When I first saw the pictures, I thought, there is no way I'm going to be able to pull that off. I can't pull off that color hat with that color jacket walking down. But somehow it works. We've got there's some beautiful, beautiful pieces.
She couldn't just adopt the same professional, elegant attire that she had in the past. We had to up the ante on that as well and give her much more dramatic silhouettes.
She's very, very well honed and dressed in high-end European clothing.
There's a broader kind of European old world scope to her clothes in this season, and it totally works, and it fits with the interiors, it fits with the exteriors.
The whole look of the first 3 episodes too in Italy, she looks stunning. I mean, I think the whole look of the show started to change right off the bat with season 3 opening that way.
Now, Alana goes through an interesting transformation, possibly one of the most interesting ones, because she goes from a sympathetic, heartfelt character in the first 2 seasons to a very dynamic, strong, and quite bold woman.
Ah, you're dead, Dr. Bloom.
Oh, Mason. We all are. Didn't you know that?
She's out there now with a vengeance. She wants Hannibal to pay for everything that he's done, for manipulating her. And she knows now that she has to go the dark way.
Your cogs are turning, Hannibal. I can hear them clicking. I don't know what you're planning with Will Graham, but you're planning something.
She can't be a goody two-shoe anymore, you know, and I love that because what a great turn, you know, for an actress to play. So even in the look, her look was a lot more based on the 40s and 50s, a lot more femme fatale.
She's shifting away from the soft silhouette of these patterned wrap dresses into suits when she's running the institution where she has Hannibal locked up, and it really is a reversal of roles. She dresses like Hannibal, basically.
I stopped drinking beer when I found out what you were putting in mine.
Who?
Who? This means you'll be spared the federal death sentence.
So yeah, she does take on Hannibal's look even, you know? So I think it's a great way of showing her power now that he's in jail. She now wears the suits that he used to have access to when he was out and free.
It was a lot of fun playing with her character because she had new hair, she had new makeup, and she always had these very dynamic suits as the partner of a billionaireess.
When we have gone from this life, I will always have this place.
In your memory palace?
My palace is vast, even by medieval standards. The foyer is the Norman chapel in Palermo. Severe and beautiful and timeless, with a single reminder of mortality. A skull, graven in the floor.
Hannibal references his mind palace as being the Norman Chapel in Palermo, which is a real place.
Which became the chapel set, which a lot of people don't believe that we didn't go to the chapel, we built the chapel.
Brian wanted to film in this chapel. It was not going to be possible because of the people that operate the chapel were not willing to cooperate. And so we were going to have to build our version of the chapel in Toronto.
And then looking at the reference and the actual place, it's just, how are we going to do this on budget and in time?
It was probably the most practical thing to do as well, simply because the chapel appears in so many episodes, and to try to leave that for Italy with the various people and production and creatures that ended up being involved in the storyline. It just wouldn't have been practical to film it in that location.
The Toronto component was a studio build, quite a substantial set. It was a run of, it must have been 100 feet long by 40 feet wide. They built some places about 1 story and some places 2 stories of set.
We had a photo crew go to the actual chapel and do some photography of the mosaic, because everything is just gold inlay mosaic tile. And once you get sort of 16 feet and beyond, it got even crazier, and that's where visual effects took over.
Which is actually the most intricate part of the chapel, because if you're familiar with Italian architecture, it's most often the most decorated part of the church is where the artwork is, and the gold leaf and gold inlay. And for us to work from it, there was going to be very, very little reference provided.
I was hoping for, that we could go into the chapel and sort of just be there on our own and photograph it, but that didn't happen. It was more of a bit of a guerrilla style photo shoot. So we ended up with thousands of photos, some with tourists going by, and we had to sort of chop everything up and make sense of it.
The art department was able to provide us with a rudimentary 3D design that they had built the first story of their structure upon. But even in that circumstance, we have to go back afterwards and resurvey, laser scan the set. So because construction, with all of the requirements of construction, they're invariably going to differ from the plan a little bit. There's just not possible to make things as perfect as you can in a computer.
We extended the walls upward and built quite an ornate ceiling, so that anytime you're looking up in the chapel set, it's a visual effects extension.
Like most television productions, the Norman Chapel is, the ground level is built out of practical materials.
How can we do gold mosaic tile in like a 90 by 16 foot set? So one of the ways we sort of figured out through trial and error was to get that sort of gold shimmer feel and look on the walls. And what we did, actually, we found a textured gold vinyl adhesive film.
The marble pieces and other things are printed and applied to the walls.
And then we took the imagery, and we had to take some of the color out and then printed that on top of the gold foil. And then that was applied to all the walls, the floor, the columns, you name it.
Hello, Dr. Lecter.
One of the most exciting things about going into the Red Dragon arc was the design of Hannibal's cell and what we were going to be doing to depict it differently than what we had seen in Red Dragon the film and also Manhunter. And in Manhunter it was stark white, it was bars and brick and very simple and very small. And in Silence of the Lambs, of course, we had seen it as this very kind of Gothic basement with large stones and translucent walls of glass. We knew that we didn't want to do that because we had already homaged that when Will Graham was institutionalized in the second season, so that couldn't be a carryover at all because it just felt stagnant and uninspired.
It went back and forth a lot between Matthew and Brian. and what it was going to be. There was just so many ideas of where they're going to go with this set.
There were a few options that just didn't seem clear or clever or special enough for our version of the story, and we started talking about Stanley Kubrick again. And Neil Marshall and I were talking about the cleanliness of the aesthetic of that room at the end of 2001.
So that's sort of, you know, there was some homage to that film for sure.
It was very gorgeous, and as you can see, it's really fast turned into his library.
And we thought about the comfort of that and the coziness of that and the unexpected privilege that Alana Bloom would give Hannibal Lecter in his incarceration under her care. That was an indicator of their history, and also the fact that he took the blame for murdering Mason Verger when in fact Alana murdered Mason Verger along with her wife.
It is not really a cell. It's actually Dr. Chilton's old office that has been built into a cell, and that's why we can still see the remains of a kind of 19th century look into the jail cell. So that was the whole idea. Brian wanted it to be different, not to be like a scar cell.
It was sort of a structural nightmare also. Just the glass was, I think, 12 feet tall. And then we had these like cutout circles in the glass, so it actually sort of weakened the glass. We had to make sure that everything was sound and safe for the actors.
I was fortunate not only having the tailor-made prison gown, I was also spared for the bars, because that was really an uphill battle with Hugh last year. Trying to film between those bars was just a nightmare. A little step on the left, a little step to the right, and you blocked his head, so they had to reshoot it again and again. I had another obstacle, which was obviously reflection in the glass.
We had like this crazy aluminum structure above the set to hold the ceiling in place, and so we can weld walls, and that was a very challenging set to build. It may not look structurally crazy, but it was our construction department did wonders on that set, because we also had a very short time frame to get it done.
And so giving Hannibal a privilege in the hopes that he would behave under lush circumstances, given that it was an incarceration, felt like it was just the new spin on the story that we needed, so we weren't just landing in a basement cell again.
That's the same atrocious aftershave you wore in court.
Everything's designed for Hannibal, right? So he's like, what is he? He's like the favorite of the teacher.
So it really was about breaking away from those first two seasons and finding a new voice for Hannibal Lecter and the television series, because I just didn't want to do the first two seasons again. I felt like that would have been easy and uninspired.